There you go. I should say got it here. Okay, yeah, this is being recorded because we want to share it not just with students here, but also with colleagues in Mexico, some of whom may be zooming in as we speak. This is not quite working. There we go. And so just so that you know, we're doing that. So this is part 2. We presented part 1 last Friday in the Department of Biological Sciences. No worries if you missed the first one. This is like one of those shows where you can pick up the story anyway. But here we'll talk more about the solutions. And in this case now today, Tatiana will introduce the first part, and then I'll talk about the second part. She will introduce the project in general, repeating some of what you may have already heard. But first, Tatiana, welcome here. Dr. Tatiana Lobato de Magalhães, originally from Brazil. I forgot all the things she did, but she can tell you about that. So why don't you introduce yourself first again, what you did and where you're from, and then we'll move into the project, okay? And then I'll take over in a bit. So.
I'm Tatiana, I'm from Brazil, and I am a wetland scientist. I met Moreno's first time through the Society of Wetland Scientists, and now I am a professor in Mexico in the Universidad Autónoma de Querétaro, and we are run together a project through the Fulbright Specialist Program. And yeah, I have been working much more with biology, ecology, and genetics of aquatic plants, particularly with landscape genetics studies and the distribution of aquatic plants around the world. And yeah, what more? Let's go for the project. This project is part of the Fulbright Specialist Program, where you have a specialist. In that case, it's the Dr. Marinos Otte, and a host institution that is the Universidad Autónoma de Querétaro in Mexico. And with this collaboration, we propose to do a project that has involved the water and the wetland subjects, and particularly in how to improve the water management and the wetland conservation in Sierra Gorda Biosphere Reserve. That's a reserve in Querétaro State in Mexico. And
It worked earlier.
You might have to just click on the PowerPoint for it to like start working again.
It worked earlier.
No.
Do
Can you use the down arrow on the keyboard? Is that?
maybe.
Just click and then try.
oh, here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we put in first some acknowledgements to thank you people and its institutions that have been involved with us in the project. There are a lot of people from the Universidad de Querétaro through several products that we did in this project, like workshops with rural communities in the mountains in the Sierra Gorda Biosphere Reserve, and also a documentary and a book that we are working on to bring more information from the community. And also get some funds from North Dakota State University to support with translation for the documentary and short films that we have produced, and from fund for knowledge from the WAC and the CONSTEC, that's the State Council in Science and Technology in Querétaro State. And a lot of people have been involved supporting us in Mexico to realize this project. And just to have an idea, where is the place that you are talking about? This is the center of the Mexico, and you can see Mexico City and Santiago de Querétaro. That's the capital of the Querétaro state. And then the Sierra Gorda Biosphere Reserve, that is a mountain region close to Santiago de Querétaro. It's a very unique and a beautiful place. and particularly special for biodiversity and also for ecotourism and another activities. This is a mountain range. We have a lot of variation in elevation that comes from 300 meters of above the sea level to 3,000 meters. So you can imagine how many variation in the landscape you have in this inside the reserve. A lot of different climates, different vegetation that can come from semi-desert to cloud mountains, semi-decidual tropical forests, pine and oak forests. There are a lot of variation in landscape and of course in many challenges that people can face with water in this region that we will talk a little bit more now. That it's a semi-arid region with a karstic geology that makes much more challenging to work in to get water, to get available water in the landscape for people to use and also animals. And when you see the precipitation, it can come a lot of variation also. So some places they can really face challenging to get water, but in other ones they can get a lot of water. But when it comes from the karst geology, it's just go down in the landscape. They can retain it for many time. Because it's a semi-arid region, it has also a really strong wet season and the dry season. They can have at least 4 months per year without rainings and the water in this region. And here is to just see how the landscape can look from one of the highest points in the reserve, and that's a really scenic mountains and really beautiful. This was in river Santa Maria. That's one of the principal rivers in the reserve. In the wet season, there are sedimentation, but usually in other moments there are no so much sediments in the water. That's just a problem when they have a big storms. And it was happened when you are doing the expedition in the Sierra Gorda. There are a lot of really beautiful springs. And we will talk a little bit about the springs and how the challenges that they face in, to conserve water in the springs in this region. And regarding biodiversity, that's the information that you have for the species that have this region harbor, and a lot of animals, and particularly some ones that are really dangerous and they can occur only in this region, like how the macaque, the military macaque in Mexico, that is one of the last remaining populations from this species in Mexico, and many others like pumas, puma cone color, and others. And and through this project, we did an expedition for 8 days with a team, and we did a lot of workshops with representatives in the communities, leaders, and the representatives from government and the civil society, but also we did a lot of workshops with rural communities, particularly 5 rural communities in different places of the reserve, and here's Marinos talking about the importance of wetlands for people from Cuatro Palos community. And then I will turn it to Marinos to talking about the challenges.
Yeah, so this project, so we did a number of things. We interviewed people and also had discussions with them. And we asked, okay, what are the problems? And the idea was that we maybe could offer some solutions based on our joint knowledge of water issues and wetlands. And wetlands are particularly useful for some solutions there because they are considered to be more natural than, say, mechanical means, and probably also are cheaper, for instance, for water quality improvement. The first problem they have is capturing water for domestic use at high altitudes. They are at, what I'm talking about is 3,000 meters, 10,000 feet. It's typically is very dry throughout the year, except for a brief period in the rainy season. So they can capture a lot of water during the rainy season, but then they need to have it, keep it. And it's karst meaning limestone. It's like a non-absorbent sponge. It's just full of holes. The water falls, it's gone. Now, there we didn't have too many ideas because this thing won't do it. Because some of the things they do, some of the ideas we might have, they already do. Let's put it that way. We were there in September, so that is the very end of the wet season. And so it looks like there's plenty of water. You saw those pictures that were in the clouds there, literally with our heads in the clouds, clearly. But some of the solutions they have is this, and so they have these nets. It's fabric, and most of the time, the moisture they get, particularly during the dry season, is some condensation at night. And it condenses on those nets and then drips into those. That doesn't work either. This thing is dead. Into the gutter that you see there, and then feeds down the mountain into cisterns, which basically hold the water. So that's one way they do it. Those are not very common, but they are near that highest community of Cuatro Palos. This is the common way of doing it. You see those tanks here, big cisterns, and you see a pipe come from the roof. And literally what they do is capture the water from the roof. But little falls, it is collected with gutters into that system and then goes into the systems. And this man is explaining to us how that all works. And we saw several examples. So they do have the systems. So the existing methods actually work really well, but one thing that they told us about and that they did in some cases, in other cases didn't do, but there's a traditional way of protecting those systems. If they don't protect them, they corrode quickly. But they can make a mixture of cactus, which they call nopal, the prickly pear cactus, opuntia, mix it with lime and salt, and you smear that onto the outside and protects it. That's a natural solution that we really liked. This is something we offered. They were talking about how the first rains, there's a lot of dust on the roofs. And we said, well, what you really should do is have a little bypass for those first rains. So you have it open so that it does not go into the systems, but you do collect it separately, for instance, to use in a vegetable garden. And so they thought that was a great idea. So you let that, the first rains, you let that run, and then you start collecting what you can. These are small things, and you don't have to be a wetland biologist to come up with it, but sometimes it just takes somebody to say that, right? Here's another one that we observed. There's a lot of erosion due to deforestation. Traditionally, they've had cattle. More traditionally so, one family would have one cow, but now to make more money because of whatever reasons, you need 10 cows to actually support your family, or 20. So the cattle population has grown out of proportion. So more land has been cleared. And so deforestation is a logical solution. Here's an example of when they told us about all the sediment coming down from the mountain. And we later, or actually before this, we saw another place that looked like this, which had been denuded. It was completely deforested. And what happened there is somewhat accidental, but to continue a farm operation there was not viable economically. And so they found out that it was actually better to not do that. And there, they don't have to plant anything. If they just stop, take the cattle away, stop removing vegetation, it'll come back. And it was in about 4 years' time already, it was regenerated quite well. One of the main species that occurs there, you see some of it in this picture, is a tree called liquidambar, which is well known in the south, but its southernmost distribution, so it's sweet gum, the southernmost distribution is all the way into Mexico, particularly there. And it is, to me, I know it from the southeast, it was kind of out of place to see it there, but it does. And that tree is a bit like maple. It grows gangbusters and really revegetates fast. And so we actually happen to be walking around there in the pouring rain, and the water that came down the streams was clean. And they told us that if you would have been here a few years ago, it would have been all very dark water with lots of sediment. So we talked about that a lot. And us talking about it in other places was good, because the people that run the place where we went are kind of almost militant about what they want to do. And that has put them at odds with other communities. So, but us coming in and saying, oh, that's actually a really good idea, probably helped their cause. Okay, so some great examples already exist, and I need to do more of it. And this is an important point. It does not require, in that environment, active planting. You don't have to scramble across those slopes and do that. It will come back real fast. It will not be primary forest, of course. It will regrow just like they do here. But the thing is that it regrows really, really fast. So another challenge, this is where it became more interesting to us anyway, because they didn't have real solutions, and we saw some, was pollution of water from springs, streams, and rivers. The issues are enormous. Earlier, Tatiana showed one of the springs with the water lilies. This is an area where several of those exist. The water comes up from the ground clean and almost instantly is polluted. And we saw this in many other springs. It comes up, and what do people do? They go swim in it, or in this case, do their laundry in it. Traditionally, yes, if you had one family that does the laundry once a week, and they don't use harsh soaps and all that, and all the deodorant and all stuff that people put on, then it maybe was sustainable, but not anymore. So that happens. Another thing here, this is a spring. Again, there's a fence around it to keep cattle out. But also for us visiting, they had actually cleared all the vegetation from around the spring. And I said, you know, that's very kind of you, but you shouldn't have done that, because the plants around the spring prevent erosion directly into the spring. And these springs in many regions around the world have a high level of endemism. And by clearing all the vegetation, you may well be cutting endemic orchids for all I know. It could be anything. And if you ask them what kind of plants grow in here, they have no idea. They know about the animals, they know about a little bit about the water, they know nothing about plants. And this is true around the world. And so they just cut it because it was in the way, you know. And to them, it's green, it's a plant, that's about it. It's known as plant blindness sometimes. I said, well, you know, like I said, you're very nice, but you shouldn't have done that. And then right next to it is this, so that water goes in there. And they tell us, yeah, they said it's really sad because the wet season comes and it fills, there's plenty of water and the cattle are not here. And we didn't see a lot of cattle around there. But then the dry season comes, gets very hot. At the moment, there where that man is standing, it's something like 110 degrees Fahrenheit right now. It's the hottest period of the year, is April, May, June, or April, May. But so it's 110 and people want to swim, but that's also when the cattle come to the spring. They go like, and then they go, so they walk right into the water and say, yeah, it's really sad. Then it's the dry season and the children want to swim, but it's really full of cow poop, so we don't want that. What's the solution? Well, I don't know, silly me, keep the cattle away is an easy one. So, and then you have the streams with homes directly on it, often not having any treatment of their water. So pollution from springs, what are the solutions? Well, don't do the laundry there. One way to do it is to still use that water, but have it gravity feed into a basin. And you have it run through the basin and out back into the stream when there's nobody there. But when they need to water, you close the outlet into the stream, you open the outlet, another outlet that goes into a marsh area, a wetland. And what then happens is that the water that is being used does not go back straight into the stream, but it is filtered first through a wetland, which we know are very good at removing pollutants. The only thing is, it takes the community to understand how it works. After that, it is best that they close that valve again and open the other one, let it go into the stream, for instance. So that is one. The cattle. So that is what I just said, create basins with two outlets. And that is the explanation of what I just said. Okay, for livestock, prevent access of cattle to the springs. How simple is that? Don't let them go into the community where the children want to swim. Let them go further down. But better still, there were remnants of troughs there. I'll show you a picture. So in the past, they would go to the spring, they would take water, put it in the troughs. The cattle would walk to the trough, would drink there, not in the spring, and then leave again. Well, now it's too many cattle maybe, and maybe a bit of laziness or whatever, they walk straight into spring. So reinstate those. There it is. That's an abandoned trough. It's right by the spring. So how easy is that, right? So that's the solution. Treatment of domestic gray water. That is a funny one because reinstate and maintain small constructed wetlands for treatment of gray water. Oh, I thought I had a picture of that, which I do not, I guess. When we were there, they showed us these small basins. There had already been an initiative to make small wetlands. So a basin with plants in it, the gray water from the house goes into it, is treated, and then goes out again. And I remember asking, I said, well, why don't you use that anymore? Is it, but didn't it work? They said, oh yeah, it works. I go like, okay, then why don't you use it anymore? But well, we didn't maintain it. And then we talked a bit about sizing and things like that, and how maybe you need to connect up several homes to do that, but you can do that. So reinstate and maintain those. Then there is urban wastewater. That is a different story. There's a facility we looked at. It looks pretty good from here. There was weather coming in as well, as you can see. We were told this. This is the treatment plant for the city of Galpan de Serra, which is the main town there. So here's the town. The water they get comes from those small communities. They drink that, nice clean water. They have a shower, they do everything city people do. What do city people do as well? It just drains into the sewer and gone. Well, there, the black water, as it's called, from toilets and things goes in there. The gray water goes in there. We talked about capacity, and he said, it would all work very well, and it still works very well, but there is much more water in it than there should be. And then we asked a bit further, and it turned out under the city of Galpan is a spring like the other springs we saw. And they didn't know what to do with it because it's under the city, because logically you built your city on top of a spring. What do you do with that? Well, you get the spring goes up, you feed it into the gray water drain, and then it goes into the treatment plant. So they have this polluted water diluted with clean water from a spring that nobody ever sees, let alone can relate to, and then it goes into a treatment plant that has no capacity because it is too much water. Okay, so that is a simple one. Prevents dilution by stormwater runoff. Alter the infrastructure. Expensive? Yeah, but if you don't do it, yeah. Prevent dilution by springs. And then we talked about tertiary treatment with wetlands, which is used around the world. Nobody has to do pilot experiments there anymore to see if it works. It works, we know it. Just do it. And they have the space for it. One other problem though, talking to where the money comes from for this treatment plant, the city of Halpan doesn't pay for it. They are right by this river. The federal government decided that the water needed to be treated. Otherwise, they were dumping everything into the river. So they built a treatment plant, which is entirely paid for by the federal government. Nobody in Halpan pays for that. So they have no vested interest whatsoever. And federal government doesn't put enough money into it to maintain it properly. So we also talked about how ridiculous that is. So, and then this, consider dry toilets. One of the places we stayed during our expedition there was an eco lodge, and no water is used for the toilets at all. You take wood chips, throw a bit in there, you do your business, then you throw ashes from wood stoves on top. And then it's easy to clean that way. You just throw it out. You put it, in this case, it goes into composting. And it works fine. They never use any water anymore for the toilets. It's kind of cool. You're still asleep. You are almost going to wake up. And then you hear this person go clunkety, clunkety, clunk as replacing at night at 5 in the morning the dry toilets. But it works. So there's just a bucket of it. It really works well. Why not do your stuff in a bucket? It works. And so you see the ashes there also in the wood chips. You take a scoop of it and that's it. It doesn't smell. It's perfect. And then the question was, how do we develop ecotourism? And we had some ideas as well. And I'm really flying through it just in a nutshell. I could talk about all these things for hours. But so there's this property that has a very steep hill, and this lady was walking by, so I couldn't help but take a picture of her. Traditional dress from the area. So they have quite a steep landscape. So how to develop ecotourism? Well, first of all, do all of the above that we just talked about. Have dry toilets, have treatment wetlands. Treatment wetlands can look beautiful. People will be interested, walk around it, see everything. So create wetlands. And here we are talking about how to create wetlands in that steep landscape, which is really easy. But we needed to talk about, putting in clay to make it waterproof and things like that. And because we had to do it outside, we could not count on electricity. We could not count on having any place to project like we're doing now. So we did it all with boards and pamphlets and things like that. It was really a fun experience to do that. So we had this board and had discussions. Oh, that quote should be there, but bordos are basically ponds, like we have them here as well. And Tatjana and I saw them yesterday in the Prairie Pothole region. It's basically a kind of a dam made in the landscape to retain water. This is a modern version where they put down plastic, which they really should not do, because geomembrane, despite its supposed durability, it will degrade. It might take half a century, and then you have microplastics in the soil. Don't do that. This is what another one looks like. And they look like that because the cattle walk straight in. So they take away all the vegetation. And then every now and then it fills up because the cattle walk in, and then they have to scrape it out with bulldozers and stuff like that. It is just insane what they do, and it's unnecessary. So we talked about how they could, again, there too, keep the cattle away from the Bordeaux. It's for the cattle, yes, primarily. But take the water, put it into troughs through gravity feed. You're in the mountains. And then let that revegetate. And this is a small one, a very old one, that we saw in one of the communities. They said, that's what it should look like. It could be even better. The sides are maybe too steep, but if you have it like that, it is more attractive also for tourists. Tourists don't want to look at that big red hole that we showed earlier. And then this, management of springs and watersheds. Nobody there thinks in terms of this water that comes out from the spring, where does it come from? Well, they do ask the question. And their answer might be it comes from God, but that's not very helpful at all. Where does it really come from? You're in a karst environment. So you think maybe that the tops of the mountains is the watershed, but that's not necessarily true. The divide, say, of the watersheds may well be behind that. Because the water that falls on a mountain can go down one side and then into a cave and then go out the other way. That is hugely difficult to do, to understand where the water comes from, particularly in an environment that doesn't have a lot of money and where the economy is bad. But that is what is needed, because they need to understand where that watershed comes from, where it is, where does the water come from. So determine the boundaries. And what they really need there is holistic management of the springs, by which I mean, they should not just look at it like we as scientists might do, the ecology and all that, what can we bring back from an ecological perspective? But there is a real function for local and not so local tourism. People like those springs. You can walk around there, it's actually very pretty, and they come up and they go into a stream, and it's a beautiful landscape there. And it's nice, it's lush, there are trees, so and naturally when it's 110 outside, that's where people want to go. So holistic needs to include all that. And I just, not so long ago, I heard another word that I like much better than the term stakeholders. We talk about include all the stakeholders. I don't like that very much. Actors is a much better one. All the actors that are involved in use and abuse of those systems need to be involved in holistic management. So finally, and I think I mentioned this also, we mentioned it on Friday, one of the most important outcomes really was that people involved in all these different aspects. We also saw a drinking water facility, for instance, and we saw so many different places, all to do with water. But what never happened before, but did now because we were there, was they all met in the end in Galpan de Serra in the central town, and met for the first time and started talking. We got people from different industries to go sit together, or different interests. Go, you sit together and talk and write down what is needed. And so this is where we are with a whole group of people. There's one of the colleagues talking. And this is the kind of thing we did. This was like all different thoughts about what is important, what do we need, and central to everything was water security. What is needed, we need to include climate change. We need to look at how water is captured and how that all interacts. So we did that, and then we had those different groups together. So CONAMP WAC. CONAMP is the entity, federal entity in charge of the reserve, and then WAC is the university. And you see all kinds of different groups, botanical gardens you see there. There's all kinds of groups, and then some. I realized in an earlier meeting that we had forgotten about one important group, and that is the religious leaders in the area. We didn't have those in the groups because we didn't really realize and we didn't know who to contact. But we do know that the Bishop of Querétaro is hugely supportive of what we do there. And you may or may not be religious, you may or may not be Roman Catholic, but these people have a lot of influence and can bring things together. So we brought those in as well. Okay, so finally, I promised we'd have another video. So we made these short videos, and some of you have seen some of what we did, maybe others not, but there are 5 short videos. And just to give you a heads up, I hope that will happen. Just this morning, we met with somebody, a curator from the Plains Art Museum, to get an exhibition going there about our project, including the 5 videos that we have, short ones. So this is one of those, and with a bit of luck, there we go. I should be able to play this. Oh, there.
Se seca demasiado, pues sí hay que buscarle. Pero tenemos un sistema de bombeo también que nos ayuda un poquito, o sea, nos ayudamos. O sea, todo en conjunto nos alcanza, nos mantenemos con el agua. Batallamos poquito, pero sí nos da, ya le buscamos allá en un bombeo que tenemos. Pero nos ha de hecho mucho, nos da mucha ayuda ese tipo de apoyo que se dio de la cisterna, ha favorecido a mucha gente, muchos nos ha favorecido. Entonces, yo creo que sí es bien importante lo que ha sido un proyecto de mucha utilidad para aquí, para la comunidad. Sí, así es. Y pues antes era más difícil, hoy ha sido más fácil para obtener el agua. Así está. Aquí yo tengo 48 años, sí, desde que me acuerdo. Aquí también llegaron algunos programas de hace como 20, no, como unos 26 años. También se consiguió reforestar. Por ahí ven los árboles, se ven arbolitos. En aquella parte estaba árida, pura tierra roja. Hoy ya está bien poblado de árboles. Esa reforestación pues ya también ha cambiado los deslaves de la tierra, ya ha ido mejorando mucho. Sí, nos ha beneficiado en ese aspecto, toda esa arbolada. Bye.
Ha sido aquí un ensayo de cómo utilizar, pero inteligentemente, cada gota de agua. No desperdiciamos absolutamente nada. Así como recogemos todo el agua de los techos, así se trata con muchísimo respeto. Y toda el agua que se utiliza, hasta la última gota, se usa para regar plantas. Cuando llegamos aquí, instalamos un pequeñísimo pantano, un sutrane, para procesar el agua y rescatar esa agua y utilizarla en el riego. Pero la verdad es que ahora ya no lo necesitamos porque instalamos únicamente baños secos. Todos los baños de este proyecto son secos. Ya no tenemos aguas negras. Aguas grises realmente ni las tratamos porque usamos solamente jabones muy gentiles que no dañan las plantas, tanto para el lavado como para bañarnos. Tratamos de no contaminar el agua y la usamos directamente en las plantas. Y creo que no lo he analizado científicamente, pero las plantas me están diciendo que están bien porque todas están sanas, dan frutos y bueno, ese es un sistema muy sencillo que tenemos, que pues en el pasado yo traté de transmitir a mucha gente, como que nadie creía que nos esperaban años muy secos y como que nadie se previene, nadie tiene ese respeto por el agua. A mí el agua siempre me emociona porque yo pienso que es algo eterno. O sea, esta agua que estamos ahorita tomando, que está pasando por el arroyo, que está cayendo del cielo, es la misma agua que siempre ha existido, nada más ahí se recicla. Se transforma. Entonces, para mí el tema del agua es algo muy especial.
nosotros antes sufríamos mucho de agua potable. El agua es muy escasa en tiempo de sequías. Entonces, hubo un voluntario que vino aquí y pues aquí estuvo con nosotros. Y ya después él nos, bueno, él me platicó de un proyecto que traía para beneficiarnos del agua. Entonces, ya, pues en tanto papeleo él anduvo y hasta que nos dieron el proyecto de las cisternas. Y él nos llevó a una capacitación al Tepozán. Allá fuimos y allá nos dieron la capacitación, cómo se organizaron para hacer la cisterna del agua. Entonces ya después, pues ya nos organizamos aquí en equipos, en grupos pequeños para que la número 1, pues era la que iba a ser la primera cisterna. La primera cisterna que construimos fue acá en la escuela. Y ya después, después ya se siguieron los demás grupos. A mí me tocó con 4 más aparte de mí y ya empezamos con don Aristeo a construir su cisterna. Él fue el que se terminó, después seguimos con la 2, la 3 y yo fui la última. Entonces, como ya después ya no me quisieron ayudar, pues ya entre yo y la señora que está ahí adentro, nos ayudó a tejer la malla. Tejimos la malla, ya después de que estuvo la malla, primero hicimos el cimiento abajo y ya después que tejimos la malla la paramos arriba y ya después que estaba parada, ahora sí le empezamos a aventar mezcla a los lados y a aplanar y todo. Y empezamos a hacer el hoyo así, ya con todo y ya mezcla. Ya que estuvo terminada, pues ahora sí pusimos los tubos hacia donde estaba el tejado para que escurriera el agua para abajo. Sí, pero antes sufríamos mucho de agua. Antes, el agua, dice mi suegra que antes la conseguían hasta por ahí de que los cerros de que les dicen el aguacatito. Antes de allá dice que se iban ellos con unos cántaros de barro a traer el agua para su consumo. Y ya, pues, ya cuando llovía, pues ellos apartaban lo más que pudieran y hasta hacían pocitas para que ahí cayera el agua limpia. Pero sí, aquí es muy escasa el agua en tiempo de sequía. Como por decir ya de marzo en adelante, pues ya es pura sequía y aquí está muy escasa. Aquí no, ahorita sí es abundante porque ahorita sí hay bastante agua.
Donde vivimos tenemos la captación de agua. El agua sí se reutiliza. Ahorita no toda, pero gran parte sí. Tratamos de no usar jabones o cloros. Más que nada buscamos jabones que no sean muy fuertes, muy contaminantes. La otra en el área que tenemos, ahí vivimos, es un espacio aproximadamente de unos 30 por 70. Que de hecho en esta temporada reforestamos alrededor de 100 plantas nativas, imagino. Lo que es el chijol, lo que le llaman flor de mayo, mocoque, mora, aquiche, capulín, guayabilla, y me faltan otras por ahí. Eso, las hemos reforestado. La otra hemos hecho le podría decir yo que también es como captación de agua. Sacamos un nivel y sembramos los árboles y hicimos una zanja arriba de donde sembramos. Entonces, como ahorita cuando llueve, esas zanjas se inundan de agua y se infiltra. Entonces voy a tener más humedad. Toda la materia orgánica que se produce dentro, vamos haciendo un acolchado, ¿sí? Y nos hace ahorrar mucha agua, porque si no llueve, no sé, un mes ahorita que estén chiquitos, tal vez tenga suficiente humedad todavía.
All right. So I'll stop the share here. I'm trying to, did I do that? I did. Questions? There was a chat, but that was early on. Yes, we can. There was about, yes, we can. There's a song to that. Questions, anybody? In Zoom, just speak up. I think you can talk. Otherwise, here, comments? Yes, Craig.
Is there a local or a regional indigenous community that still has kind of cultural traditions that may or may not be tied in water in any way?
Well, it's,
Yes.
yes, yeah, you talk about that. You know more than I do.
Yes, there are in this region very few more traditional indigenous communities, but there are many people that live in traditional houses and they speak the traditional language. But just a very few. Great part are coming from traditional indigenous families, but it's just much more living like in house that the most part of people live in, and just changing a lot the culture. But there are just think you have more than 100 and people and maybe 26 that live in traditional houses and 26 that are speaking the traditional language in the Sierra Gorda.
Yeah, so what I noticed is that here in the United States, for instance, we still have the reservations for Native Americans, and you know, still they're often mixed communities. There in Mexico, it appeared to me that instead of people, of course, there were native people that were completely eradicated and all that, but the bigger groups seem to have mixed more, but then still integrated these native traditions with the Western, mostly Spanish traditions. And so you get these communities where there are different languages spoken, not necessarily by everybody, but by large groups of the community. And it's also noticeable in the festivals and all kinds of celebrations that they have that exist sort of hybridized often with Roman Catholicism. So, you know, you have churches with native symbols on them. You showed me a church in Querétaro that has these monstrous faces that were actually put on by the Roman Catholic Church to scare away the native population, you know. But they have, in a way, much more mixed than has happened here with those community states.
There are a lot of syncretism between traditional religions and the more modern religions in the region. But of course, you can change it much for one region to another. For example, in the Querétaro state, the place that there are much more community, indigenous community and indigenous people is close in Amialco, that's more southern state and not inside the reserve.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I don't know if you remember from the video we showed last week, it starts with this man in Landa talking about the Chichimeca and how Landa used to be Lonja, the place of mud. And so Chichimeca is one of these groups and the languages that's being spoken in the area. Yeah, so quite intriguing, yeah.
So in the Western United States, some of the regional tribes actually have some political power that they've exercised to recover water rights that had been surrendered during, 100 years ago during Manifest Destiny, and like to restore water to a pyramid lake, for instance, in the Indirect system. I just wondered if there's any, if that's possible there, or if it sounds like.
From what I've observed, one of the larger groups is the Mayans, for instance, not just in Mexico, but also in Guatemala and Belize. And they are certainly a powerful group. Further north, I don't know how important those are, but they're large numbers.
I think he's asking much more about like a water fund or some water rights, no?
Yeah,
For the tribes, yeah.
Yeah, what their historic relationships were with the land and the water and wildlife, and if they're if there's cultural traditions that they could like point to in lawsuits, for instance, right?
Yeah, yeah.
To demand.
Yeah, in the great part, there are, in this point, an interesting example that's not in Querétaro, but in San Luis Potosí, that's the border state, that there are many wetlands that are important and really connected for religious ritual from some indigenous that I forgot the name now. And they usually to come from the plateau, the highlands, like 2,000 meters above sea level to the sea, going only in wetlands, and they do kind of rituals. And these wetlands are, you can't have access to that place, but there are some initiatives around the country in that meaning. But now the lands are, for the rural lands, the great part of them are divided in ejidos. That's a kind of communities, groups that can be led by indigenous or not, or a mix of indigenous and the non-indigenous people. And all of the water rights comes from how the people are managing the ejidos. That's a big land that is shared from group.
Ejidos are comparable to what the British would call commons, where there's one, say, a large area that is used by the entire community. And there's a mutual understanding of what you do and can't do.
Yeah, and then now then they start to face much more of challenges with water, that there are no much water or the water is not clean, and some communities don't have a water coming from pipe. They can start having a much more conflicts between people that are in the rural areas and the highlands or in the cities. There's the towns inside the reserve, but also the big cities like Santiago de Querétaro.
Hey, I see Henry is on from El Maíz Mais Pequeño. Henry, what do you think? Maybe he's not listening. Can you talk?
El Maíz Más Pequeño is a civil society in the Sierra Gorda.
Oh,
And he have been with us in some of the workshops.
He disappeared.
No, I'm here.
Call him.
Buenas tardes.
Oh, I was wondering, Henry. So, yeah, any comments from your end, Henry?
No, just well, thank you very much for creating this space to show the experiences of the Sierra Gorda. For all who are tuning in and are listening, the visit from Marianos and Tatiana, and along with the assistance of members of the University of Querétaro, it created a very interesting space for us. I am the director and co-founder of a small NGO, and due to the pandemic, you know, we hadn't really had the opportunity to join with our colleagues and talk about the current issues, in this case pertaining to water. And so the visit from Marianos and Tatiana gave us a very important opportunity to renew our commitment and our relationship with other local and regional actors. And I can say that since that visit, things have been advancing. We're approaching Semana Santa, which is the one of the biggest tourist vacation times of the year. And we are also experiencing, so they're coming, the tourists are coming, and there's going to be a large consumption of water. But in Jalpan, 3 days ago, it was 41 degrees centigrade, which I believe is about 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So we are entering the brunt of our dry season, and local regional tourist operators are getting ready to receive a very large tsunami of tourists. So there's still some important issues, and we hope that this vacational period will be also an opportunity for us to address the regional water issues with local authorities. So very good presentation. Felicidades, Marianos, Tatiana.
Thank
Gracias,
you.
gracias, Henry, and we'll talk more. We'll be back, okay? I think we have to leave it here because the hour is up, as they say. If there was a question, yeah, one more.
I was just wondering, do you think that any of like the local cities are actually gonna adopt any of your solutions that you provided, or do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, when we talked, for instance, with the water treatment plant about putting in the wetland, they were really very interested. And I think they will do that. The smaller communities where they already had the small treatment systems for gray water, they were enthused by it. Now, whether they really will do it, I told them I will be back, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I really plan to be back next year, next fall. So.
Yeah, and we are very glad that you are writing a book from this project, because we went to the communities and had the workshops, but it's just really fast contact, and because of it, we thought that maybe if we having the solutions and ideas in a book, that could be nice to share it with the communities, and they were planning to return it later this year to give the book for the communities, and the two projects that we are 5 short movies like that, but an entire documentary that's 1 hour documentary, and it's really nice because this material, the audio visual, the videos are like, it's not Marianos or Tatiana or the university or scientists say what the problems they have or what solutions they can use. It's the people from this region that are talking, and they can share the solutions and the problems that they are facing with each other in a very interactive way.